always good to talk with guys that are Hall of Fame caliber players, as well as somebody I've gotten a chance to work with a couple times, the great longtime New York Giants running back, Tiki Barber. And Tiki, I guess I want to start with this. I know what you're doing on the radio and TV, and you've really carved out an awesome, awesome career for yourself. But for the people that aren't as familiar, can you just kind of walk them through what you have going now in your post-football life?
Yeah, I mean, it's been almost 18 seasons, Ross. It feels like forever, even though I still feel young, and that's because I have young kids. But it's been all media since I left the NFL. I started at the Today Show, and then did a few other iterations of things, Yahoo, etc., and then ended up at CBS National Radio. And about a year and a half ago, I got flipped to WFAN, which is local and the largest, terrestrial radio station in the country, at least as it pertains to numbers. And it's been awesome. Me and Evan Roberts do a show. But on weekends during the football season, after I say 3 or 4 years of grinding on the 7th and sometimes the 8th team, I got on a full schedule with CBS broadcast, calling NFL games with Andrew Catalan and Matt Ryan. So my weekends were all NFL, but Monday through Friday, I'm talking Mets and Yankees and Giants and a lot of Jets this past season because of the Aaron Rodgers drama. Every now and then we get into some hockey, but it's really basketball, just the Knicks. We don't talk about the Nets. But that's been my existence. And then raising kids. I got 6. One's at Princeton, your alma mater. One's down up at Brown, 2 13-year-olds and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So I'm kind of all over the place doing media, but also trying to be a dad.
Wow, that is wild. I knew you had several. I didn't know you had 6. That sounds like a lot. Talk about just doing a game every week and being able to kind of get into that groove and that rotation. It's funny because for me this past year, I did college and NFL. I was like the 7th crew for NFL and the 2nd crew for college, but sometimes different play-by-play guys.
Yeah.
Sometimes different 3-man booth with Jason McCourty, just me and Tom McCarthy sometimes. And I'm envious for sure of just being able to have same producer, same director, same play-by-play guy, same guy in the booth. And you were one of the few guys that knows what it was like for me this year to kind of be in a 3-man booth at times too.
Yeah, so I did that, Ross. Your path, that's what I was on until last season. It was sometimes I was with Beth Mowens, and then I'd be with Andrew Catalan, but other times I'd be with Tom McCarthy. I also did some college games on radio, and so it's your mind just can't focus on process and routine like we're used to being athletes. It's the same thing. Monday's the recovery day, Tuesday's the off day, Wednesday's first and second down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It got challenging, but I knew it was the grind I wanted to be on. I didn't know I wanted to call games until I want to say 7 or 8 years ago. And my brother asked me to be in a 3-man booth with him when he was working at Fox. And when I did those games with him, they happened to be Giants games, so they were a little bit easier for me to prepare for. I realized how much I missed watching tape, like understanding what was going on and digging into the nuances of the game as it's evolved, because it's very different from when you and I were playing. It's a different game now. Offensively, I think defensively, it's even evolved. And so the challenge that you mentioned is real. But once you get stability and once you get on a team that's the same thing every week, one, you have a lot more fun because you see the same guys every weekend. But I think, two, you get into a rhythm, right? You understand your play-by-play man's cadence or female as well, because there's obviously female play-by-play announcers in this and in CBS. Like, you understand the cadence, and it makes it easier to just have a conversation, because that's what we want. Like sitting at a bar, talking about the game that we're all watching, that's what you want. And I think the more you have reps with the same crew, the easier it becomes.
When you and I were together for the Super Bowl, I asked you about your football career because I remembered that your name. I couldn't remember if you were a Hall of Fame finalist or semifinalist, but I knew that your name was up for it. And I remember thinking, man, his last year, he still had a really good year.
Yeah.
So, like, if he had played 2 or 3 more years, and maybe even that next year, if you had stayed with the Giants and they won the Super Bowl, like that might have been enough to put you over the top as a Hall of Famer. And I asked you, and I'll ask you again here, if you had any regrets about that, about not, playing a couple more years to, try to make a big push for Canton.
So I didn't play the game to get into Canton. You got to remember, I mean, my early years, I was just a guy. I was that jag we always talk about, just a guy, man, returning punts, being a third down back. I had some big games here or there, but I was just hanging on. And then Sean Payton in 2000 changed our offense, and it made it a lot like the St. Louis Rams, the greatest show on turf, where Marshall Faulk was used in so many different ways, catching balls out of the backfield and misdirection, and what Coach Pope, our tight end coach, used to call Dickum plays, right? Make them think you're going that way, but we're actually going out the back door. And I started to excel. And so at the end of my career, when I'd had 2 or 3 really great seasons, I had to make a decision about what I wanted to do with the future of my life. And I was getting beat up. I'm not big, Ross. You know this. I'm 190 pounds right now. I had to work to keep on 205. And I was getting 400 or so plus touches a year. And I just felt myself slowing down, not loving the game as much as I did. I love prepping. I didn't love preparing physically for the game. And so I walked away because of the opportunities that were sitting right there. As I mentioned before, with the Today Show and Football Night in America and some just other things that I had going on. And the Hall of Fame wasn't even on my mind. My brother played to get into the Hall of Fame. So I played for 16 seasons, and ultimately he was enshrined in Canton a year ago. So, I mean, I get it, and I understand why people think that I would have regrets. Maybe the timing of the Super Bowl sucked a little bit, but other than that, I didn't play to be a Hall of Famer. I played to be as great as I could be, and I left it all on the field. And when it was time for me to walk away, I walked away.
Do you think guys are more likely, Tiki, to regret retiring too soon or regret retiring too late?
Well, I mean, I think it's influenced by what you see around you as it pertains to the game. And I'll give you the perfect example. I mean, I grew up loving Walter Payton, but I also admired a guy like Earl Campbell. Now, I couldn't play like Earl Campbell because he was a brute. I mean, he would run through you. I still remember those old videos of him ducking his head and just running through a defender and his jersey getting ripped off. And I remember when I was second or third year, I met him and he was in a wheelchair. And it's not like he was old. He was probably 58 or 6, 7 or 8 at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, I cannot be like that. Right? I want to be doing things, and I want to be physical and active and play with my kids. And so when my body started to get worn down, I knew it was time for me to walk away. And when it was taking me 3 or 4 days to recover, I knew it was time for me to walk away. And living in New York City, I had so many other opportunities. I just jumped at them.
Totally agree, by the way. I think you're more likely. I mean, if you retire too early and you miss it or you miss a Super Bowl, would that stink? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also kind of a short-term thing. Whereas, like, if you have negative, I always think now, here's how I look at it, Tiki, and I tell guys this, like, it's a scary thing to end it because it's your identity.
Yes.
And at least it was my identity. And also because you'll never be able to replicate that again.
Yeah.
But, I think about now, like, how much money they would have to pay me to go back out there to take that physical risk
Right.
of a serious injury, to take once you're on the other side and you've got good things going, you realize that there is life after football. And I mean, they would have to pay me now more than I ever made in my career. I mean, obviously I'm 45, like I wouldn't do that, but if I was still 32 or something, it would have to be a lot of money, man, for me to go out there and add that wear and tear to my body, the hits to the head with all the CTE stuff, and just take I mean, there's always that really bad injury risk too.
And Ross, I mean, when we were playing, you and I, that CTE, that repeated head trauma, that wasn't a thing. They weren't even talking about that really. And I remember my last season, we played the Dallas Cowboys, and DeMarcus Ware ripped across me to try to knock the ball out, and he hit me in the head and knocked me unconscious. I mean, I was out cold on the field. They got me up, took me to the sideline. I get to the sideline. They give me the smelling salts. Drew Bledsoe throws an interception 3 plays later. and I'm right back on the field. Right? They didn't take my helmet. They didn't. They weren't sending me in to get evaluated. I didn't have concussion protocol. None of that stuff. You just went right back on the field. And now, in retrospect, right? That's just it's the stupidity of ignorance because we didn't know any better. But it. I mean, I retired at the right time because I was one of those guys that would not come off the field. Right? I broke my thumb in a game. I said, tape it up. Didn't even take my glove off. Tape it up. Let's go. I broke a forearm. I played with it in 2000. I was one of those guys because it's how I was raised in the game, and I would have been in a bad physical state at this point in my life. I think.
It's funny. I remember one time, Tiki, I started at right guard for the Bills in '03 at the Meadowlands against you guys, against the Giants.
Yeah.
And Bledsoe got knocked unconscious, and it was like he was sleeping on the 50-yard line at Giant Stadium, like totally asleep. And I don't think he missed a series.
No.
I mean, that was third down or whatever. We came off the field. Next time we went out there, he was out there. Like, looking at that now, like that would never happen. And so we didn't know back then, but we do know now. And your sons, play college football. So
Yeah.
talk about that part of it, because that's interesting too.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're right because they're both in Ivy League schools, so the football is not, it's not the high intensity of like being at a Miami or a Michigan or one of those programs. And but it is still a physical game. And I remember AJ when he was probably 12 or 13, he got a concussion. It was his first concussion, and thankfully he told us. Right, he didn't just try to hide it. I would have hidden it at his age. He didn't try to hide it. And so we were able to get him evaluated. We took him off the field. He ended up missing the next 2 games. He was upset about that, but he understood. And I think teaching him at a young age that the long-term injury is not worth the short-term, what you think is glory, is something that they still understand. And even though they're playing now at college, one at Princeton and one at Brown, I think they realize that their body is the most important thing. The game is what it is, right? They don't have to and probably won't play in the NFL. Who knows what's going to happen, but they don't need to do it. I needed to do it, right? I didn't have any money. I didn't have any wealth or affluence with my mom just working as much as she did and not being able to make ends meet all the time. My kids aren't in that situation. So they play the game because they love it, not because they have to.
It's awesome. You said something when we were together at the Super Bowl that really stuck out to me about Christian McCaffrey. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said something like you think he's like the best athlete that's ever played the position, or the best something that's ever played the position. I want you to expound upon that.
Yeah, so I was watching a game with my brother, and we were watching like him do these things that you don't see running backs do. Like, the hurdle that we see now with running backs, Juszczyk did it in the Super Bowl. Like, they just jump over guys, but it's more like a leap. Like, they're jumping up. They're not like hurdling. Now, my brother was a hurdler in high school, and he was a national champion indoor, and his form was like perfect, right? And it was running and lifting the leg and diving over. Chris McCaffrey had a touchdown run. I guess it was a reception actually, and it was probably, I don't know, week 12 or 13, and he caught the ball. He had traffic in front of him. A guy is going down towards his ankles, and he perfectly hurdled him. Like, a perfect hurdle is not breaking stride. It's like going over the hurdle and still keeping your cadence intact. And he goes and he scores a touchdown. And I'm just looking at that like, who can do that? Right? That's a track move in the middle of a football game. And me and my brother looked at each other like, dude, this kid's the best athlete to ever play this position. And he's got the physical tools. He's tough as hell. He's dynamic. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's already got over 6,000 yards receiving and 4,300 yards. Rushing and 4,300 yards receiving. And so he's on the verge. He's only 26 of hitting this rarefied territory. That is a running back that has 10,000 yards rushing and 5,000 yards receiving. There's only 3 of them: Marshall Faulk, Marcus Allen, and myself. Christian McCaffrey is going to get that before his 7th season, or he'd probably get 10,000 yards in 2 seasons. So he's going to be on a plane that most running backs don't get to. And I don't know if we appreciate it. And this is with missing the better part of 2 seasons.
So that's 10,000 rushing, 5,000 receiving. It's Marshall Faulk, Marcus Allen, and you?
That's it.
So maybe you should be in the Hall of Fame. Tiki, do you
I
think you
mean,
should
it's all
be?
about the narrative for the Hall of Fame. I saw the 1,000 yards receiving, and so I'm the only one returning yards because I did punt returns and kickoff returns. So it's all about the narrative. The Hall of Fame is interesting. If they can create a story about you that is compelling and sets you apart, then you'll get into the Hall of Fame. Because you remember when Terrell Davis, got into the Hall of Fame. He only had
Yeah.
3 or 4 really great years, but 2 of those were Super Bowls. And the narrative, the story around him was, can you write the history of the NFL vis-a-vis John Elway without talking about Terrell Davis? And the answer was no. I also remember when Terrell Owens, didn't get to the Hall of Fame. We were talking to Clark Judge, and I asked him, I was like, this is a no-brainer for T.O. He's second in all-time receiving yards, touchdowns, blah, blah, blah. You're not even having a conversation. And they created the talking point that, well, nobody wanted him, right? He was great, but he was never stuck. In fact, Bill Parcells wouldn't even say his name. So there was this narrative about T.O. that made him less than he actually was statistically. And that's what the Hall of Fame is all about. And I understand that. And so it's about creating, or I guess pushing out a narrative that people will believe.
Does it bother you that the running back position has been as devalued as it has been? It's got to hurt a little bit, right?
Well, I think devalued, and as far as paying the guy, but if you
Right.
have a great one, you know it. Like Christian McCaffrey, he's not devalued. Like, he's one of the most valuable players in the league. But I think it has become a position where they feel like one guy is not enough. They feel like you need 2 or sometimes 3 guys to do everything, whether it's because a running back won't block. And now calling and studying games as much as I do now, I see why defenses have changed, and they'll mug a linebacker and they'll dog them for the simple purpose of attacking a running back. It's not to really get to the quarterback. It's just attack the running back. And maybe that running back doesn't know how to, or is unwilling to block you. And so you mess around just by attacking the running back and getting pressure on the quarterback. And so the all-purpose guy is not really developed as much anymore. So I think that's the devaluation of the running back. But if you have a guy like Christian McCaffrey, trust me, it's not devalued.
Well, and it's certainly not devalued by the coaches. That's for sure, because they know how valuable it is. Check him out on social media at Tiki Barber. Obviously doing a fantastic job with all of his different endeavors. Tiki, always great to see you in person, and thank you so much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, Ross. Be good, dude. See you soon.